Joining us now, Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island. He's the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. You oversee the Department of Defense. As you've just heard, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense testified that she learned in late August that money to Ukraine appropriated by Congress would likely flow if the Ukrainians committed to investigations that President Trump wanted, political investigations involving the Biden. So how concerning is that?
It's terribly concerning. The aid that we voted for on a bipartisan basis in the House and the Senate was signed by the president, was designed to aid an ally who is in direct confrontation with Russia. The Russians invaded Ukraine and the Donbass. They're fighting through proxies. They're trying to destabilize, in many respects, the Ukrainian government. This aid was actually essential, and not just essential for the Ukrainians. It was essential to maintain the integrity of our position in Europe, along with our NATO allies. So to use this as a attempt to extort or to somehow shake down a foreign government is absolutely outrageous. If that's the case, we have to establish that.
She also testified that all of the national security leaders were on the exact same page that Ukraine needed this money, that it was essential. You also served on the Senate Appropriations Committee. How irregular was this holdup, this last-minute holdup that was given to these national security officials? The aid is being suspended, at least for the time being.
It's very unusual because, again, as you point out, Ukraine desperately needed this money. They are in a day-to-day contest with the Russians. They need the support, both in terms of not only their operational capacity, but also the signal of political support by the United States to the government of Ukraine. And to hold it up is mind-boggling. To hold it up without any sort of public discussion or communication with the Congress. You know, there might be incidents in other situations where there's questions that the money's not being spent well, or we're going to have to restrict some types of funding because they're not ready to accept it yet. None of that was readily apparent during this time.
What evidence have you seen that so far, at least so far, that explains why that military aid to Ukraine was put on hold? What was the explanation you've seen and were given?
No explanation that I was given. We were making inquiries. Several of my colleagues, and then it became so widespread. So you had so many people interested in getting this aid to the Ukrainian government that we were calling and we weren't getting any real response. It's just, it's not happening, it's not happening. Again, this is a situation where the aid was critical for the defense of someone who is on the front line against Soviet expansion in Middle Europe, and also a country that needs our support because they're going through a very difficult political struggle as well as a military struggle.
As you know, the public televised hearings in the impeachment inquiry will begin Wednesday morning. What will you be watching for in these hearings, Senator?
Well, this is an opportunity on a bipartisan basis for questions to be asked the witnesses. Ambassador Taylor is someone who has a remarkable reputation, a graduate of West Point, a combat leader in Vietnam, and a dedicated public servant. I think we'll all be looking not only for the facts, but also at the demeanor of the witnesses. And I think with the ambassador, you'll find someone who is committed his whole life to public service, and that'll resonate. The big judge will be the American people. They have to look at a process to see that it's fair, to see that both sides have their opportunities to question, and also to measure not just what is said, but the veracity and the character of the witnesses. And I think, again, that'll be critical this week as we begin these open hearings, as the House begins them.
As these hearings will begin on Wednesday, the president will welcome President Erdogan of Turkey to the White House. Is that appropriate, Senator? You've watched this very closely. Considering the U.S. believes Turkish-backed forces may have committed war crimes in Syria, and specifically I'm referring to what James Jeffrey, the special envoy for Syria, testified before Congress on October 23rd when he said, quote, "We've seen several incidents which we consider war crimes."
No, I think it is completely inappropriate. I think President Trump should have informed President Erdogan when he crossed the border with at least the tacit approval of the president that a visit to Washington would be completely inappropriate. We have many issues with the Turks, issues that have to be resolved, not only their situation in Syria, but also their acquisition of the S-400 anti-defense system from the Russians. We have a host of issues, and to give a presidential visit, I think, just undercuts all of our real leverage in terms of talking seriously with Erdogan about the future of Turkey and the future of NATO and what he will do in Syria. He's proposed, for example...
Yeah, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, he's proposed, for example, of relocating hundreds of thousands of Syrian Sunnis into Kurdish lands. That could be an explosive sort of move on the part of igniting tensions between the Kurds and others. And that's the kind of behavior that can't be tolerated, and he's talking about it very glibly.
You think that potentially could alienate some of your Republican Senate colleagues who are also as worried as you are about the president's Syria policy? The same senators, by the way, he'll need to stand by him if there is a full-scale trial, an impeachment trial in the Senate.
Well, just looking at the situation in Turkey, yes, I think it will. I think they're quite concerned, many of them, about what's happened. We walked away from an ally that fought with us to destroy ISIS, or at least to degrade it significantly. It's not destroyed. That's one of the concerns we have, that it'll reconstitute itself. But they lost 10,000 fighters, and we were able to operate. We tragically lost 6 or 7 Special Forces operators. That is a great loss to their families and to the country, but compared to the suffering of the Kurds, it is quite a difference. And we're also worried now about whether the Kurds can maintain those prisons in which ISIS, hardcore ISIS, some international fighters are held, whether they will abandon those positions to defend their villages as the Turks move down. I know sort of the Department of Defense is trying to backfill after the president announced very dramatically, but I think also very foolishly, that we're pulling all of our forces out. They're now trying to backfill with several hundred troops to go in there, but it's all without any plan. It's impulsive. It doesn't recognize the sacrifice of our allies, and it leaves us in the position throughout the entire Middle East of whether or not any country would trust what we say we'll do.
Senator Reid, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Wolf.